Off we go. By the way, this is me, and the dapper gentleman over here is you there, and the two of us will be doing the presentation. We are the Climate Buddies. We're working with the Interfaith Environmental Network in putting this together, and we also have an Energy Action Team as part of the Interfaith Environmental Network, and you are invited to join it. It is an action team, it's an energy action team, as you'll see. Raise of course. So, part one is, I want to introduce this. I think it's very important. This will actually be done in two parts. The first part is just as stated. This is something you may not have heard before. The fact is that achieving energy transformation, which is the key to having a completely sustainable, humane future, beginning at once and moving rather smartly through mid-century and then continuing through the end of the century, is our claim that you can support with all kinds of technology, that it's possible to do this. It is a big job. But we're not just trying to get by. We're not just trying to mitigate and suffer through and somehow scrape through and limp to the wire. We want to win big. We think that's entirely possible. It's the only thing we're shooting for. So we're talking about environmental and energy and moral victory. And that last one is there because this is a group of the interfaith community. That last one you might not always see on slides, but it's important here. Now, if we meet the challenge of global warming, this is what's possible. There's an or else. If we don't meet that challenge, and if we don't do it aggressively, ambitiously, and quickly, there is an or else. Part two, you will carry that part of the presentation, and you'll see why that is. So it's a challenge we have to meet anyway. The saying is we can meet it, and we can do it in a wonderful way, in such a way that when we're finished, looking back, our people that come after us, the generations that come after us, will say, that was a great thing to do. Why did they wait? Why did it take a challenge like global warming to make these people do, our beloved ancestors, do what was so obviously a good thing? Well, the fact is we have that challenge, so we don't have a choice. But that'll be addressed, and then finally we'll go into expanding on this a little bit, expanding for credibility purposes, and then finally we'll end up with, okay, what's to be done? That's the challenge, and we can do it. We know we can do it. What we're saying is every person on the planet will be involved in this, and you're fortunate because you're involved in it right now. So here's the question. Having seen what you've seen, if you could work on meeting the greatest challenge that humankind has ever faced, knowing that it's possible to succeed and succeed big, win big, wouldn't you want to do it? You know, if you ask the old quarterback sitting on the bench, and he's got 2 minutes left and he's down by 6, where would you rather be? Wouldn't you just kind of like to enjoy the rest of the game? You've got all these aches and pains. Why wouldn't you just stay here on the bench and enjoy the game? Let that young kid get his ears beat back. No, that's not what they say. The great ones always say, I want the ball in my hand. So that's why we put this together, and that's why we're calling you to be part of this. It is exciting to know that you're working on the biggest problem that humankind has ever faced. Not many people even have that opportunity. It is a real privilege. So it's a rhetorical question. I don't know many people who would turn that down if they realize that's what's at stake. Well, that is what's at stake. Granddaddy, what did you do in the big transformation? What was your role? You don't want to say, well, it was just too big. I didn't think I could handle it. I didn't think I could do anything, so I didn't do anything. That is not an acceptable answer. So you may not have your own grandchildren, that you know that we are the grandparents of all children that come after us and after them and after them. That's the reality. You know that. So act on the basis that you know it. Did you leave it in better condition when you were born? You know, if we didn't have this built into our genetic code somewhere, we never would have made it out of the caves. So we know that that's the right thing to do. And people historically have sacrificed in all kinds of ways in order that their kids would have it better than they did, and their kids would have it better than they did. Ad infinitum. Nope, it's not time to work yet. So to reassert it, the greatest threat to human civilization is paired with something, you don't see this phrase very often, energy poverty. What would that be? Energy poverty is there are people on the planet that, in fact, some of them live here in Austin, Texas, who do not have enough energy to allow them to live a dignified life, a decent life. That's not right. But even if you think it's okay, which I doubt anybody in this room does, even if you thought it was okay, morally acceptable, it's not feasible. We live in a world where everybody knows what everybody is doing. There might have been a time when you could have people that are starving to death, whose kids are probably not going to have enough food the next morning, probably won't ever live to see adulthood. If they do, they won't have any jobs, and there's nothing decent for them to work on, to be fulfilled and to contribute. There are people like that, and there was a time when you might be able to get away with that because they didn't know. Those days are gone. This is the big global village. Even people that are not connected to the power grid or the internet somehow know what's going on. So even if it was ethically acceptable or morally acceptable, it's not feasible. Not to live in a worldwide gated community. You're talking about fences on the Rio Grande. How about fences around the United States of America? Forget it. So you can't do it. You can't live in a world, in a gated community in today's world. And it wouldn't be any good if you could. You would not want to bring children into that kind of world, even if you could. We, meaning Climate Buddies, Environmental, Interfaith Environmental Network, we are ready to work with you in building a roadmap. We'll sketch out a little bit of the roadmap tonight. There's more to be done, but that's what we're here to do. If everybody knows what is at stake, everybody knows it's possible to win big, and everybody knows that they've got a role to play, then it's time to work. All right, let's get to work. Fascinates me, and I can watch from here.
So I was the other guy at the front slide. My name is Joep. That's how you pronounce that. I'd like for you to become active the next couple minutes while I help undress. There are memos, sticky notes on your chairs. Every row has some of them. I would like for you to take a little time to write down 2 answers for each of these 3 questions. So put the number of the question on a sticky note and then answer them one by one. And then somebody will come by and collect them, and we'll hang them up in the back of the room, and we'll collect your questions around, hey, I'm here tonight, these are my most 2 pressing questions. That's question number 1. The second one is, if you've been working on the energy and climate change challenge, is there something in the last couple of months you've done that you want to share with us? That's question number 2. And question number 3 is, what result would you like to see happen if you become involved with the Interfaith Environmental Network, the Energy Action Team, and what should we have accomplished by the end of 2012? Because we're going to do this for at least a year. So take your time. I'm going to undress, and I'll talk again in a few minutes.
Could you repeat the assignment in summary once again, please?
Yes. Let me try to undress while I do that. The questions hang up on the wall there as well. They're in the back. They're here. They will be here on the side. What I want you to do in your sticky notes, write down the most important answers that you have to these 3 questions. Use 1 sticky note per question, number the question, and then hand them to your right neighbor so they get to the end of the row and they will be passed on to the back.
Do we want our names on it?
No. So I'm just going to leave it at this, if it's appropriate. But there's a reason. While you're working on these answers, take your time. We'll have until the end of the hour to collect them all, so just find your moment. Surprisingly enough, the greenhouse effect that we're all talking about, climate change, is not a bad thing. It's essential to life on Earth. If we didn't have a warming blanket around the Earth, we would be subjected to huge temperature changes depending on whether the sun was shining or not. If there was no climate greenhouse effect, temperature differences here, you can see it goes from minus 244 degrees Celsius at night to 225 degrees during the day. So it would be very unlivable. So thank you, greenhouse effect. The problem is that if we make the climate, if the greenhouse effect make it too hot, then let's just put this back on. I may get a little bit too hot. So if I get too red, just let me know, and I'll take another blanket up. But that's the idea. The next generation will decide whether we are successful in taking my zip-up shirt off or not. Make it comfortable. So that's what we're doing here. We're talking about the blanket around us is very beneficial to life, but it shouldn't get too hot. So when we talk about making it hot, if we talk about the problem itself, what we're doing as human beings the last 200 years predominantly is adding to the atmosphere what we call greenhouse gases. And you see the most important greenhouse gases listed on this slide. And something a little bit chemical, but you must have heard about carbon dioxide. We're emitting carbon dioxide into the air. If you cook at home, you probably cook on natural gas. That's the second most important greenhouse gas. It's methane, CH4, and it's laughing gas. We're pushing so much out of that.
Need more.
These are associated with human activities. We burn fossil fuels. We have unsustainable agriculture. We're using fossil fuel-based fertilizers. We have cows and we feed them corn so they burp and fart and you have methane. We do it on such a scale that we're adding so many greenhouse gases that it's getting warmer and warmer. We're using energy, and Bob said we need even more energy, but the energy we're using in a very inefficient way, and we're using energy that's very carbon intensive. So we need to switch to more renewable energy sources that are less carbon intensive. Now the good news is, solar and wind, prices are coming down. They're almost commercially competing, even in the free market that we have here in America. So that's good news. We can do this. We're talking about a very thin sliver of life on Earth. So the atmosphere is part of the biosphere. It's what's on top of the world. And we're living in this very small, narrow band. So we're talking about preserving life, as we know it, in a very small sliver of the Earth. And we've managed to change the composition of everything that's up here. That's a big job. We've been working on it very hard. And tonight is the invitation to work on it very hard as well, but then the other way around. Too much information in this graph, but what you see here is that you see here the CO2 emissions that we put in the air, and just follow the blue line. That's where it goes up. This is the trend. If you look at it from 1900 to the year 2000, that's where we are. The Earth has been around quite long. This is happening at a very fast pace. And we seem to be doing very well. We're good at this because it's getting worse progressively. We're not just pushing CO2 in the air. We're also reversing the role of the oceans that it plays in the world. The oceans used to be a CO2 carbon dioxide source for the atmosphere, we've turned it into a sink. So the natural system evolved over some time. We've been able to reverse that in 200 years. We're going to make the ocean so acidic that ocean scientists project that in less than 20 years, crustaceans and coral reefs will not be able to deposit calcium in their skin and their bones anymore. They will dissolve. It becomes too acidic. And you see, what you see here in this graph is the CO2 levels in the atmosphere over 500 years, certain bandwidth, and then a spike where we are, a little dramatic there. And we see here the acidity of the ocean reversed. It's almost like a mirror image. Quiet within a bandwidth, and poof, goes down.
How many years has that change taken place over?
The role of the mankind we were talking about is the last 200 years.
No, I mean on that graph.
The graph is 500 years.
The entire slide is 500 years.
But the little bit at the end, how many years is that?
The spike up.
The spike up and down.
Spike up and down.
The most we see in climate change has happened, and the effects that we're seeing have happened in the last generation. We're talking about the last 25, 30 years. So we see nature responding. It's getting warmer. Species have to adapt. We see nature, we see species move. Butterflies fly more north than ever before. Mountain species that live in very cold areas in the Andes or the Alps or the Rockies, they're moving up. At some point they're running out of mountain. It gets hotter. So we see that some species adapt to temperature change, but bear in mind the temperature change tolerance for most species, if they can't run or fly, is limited to, say, a degree of Celsius temperature or so. The tree can't move. So resilience of ecosystems is impaired. Climate is becoming more and more torrential, and if you look at all the prediction models around climate change, I feel better. In all models, there are some differences between models for certain areas. All models, for example, for Texas show to hotter, less frequent rain, but overall more rain. So we get more flash floods. So we need to manage more of what we are already having difficulty in managing with here in Central Texas. Droughts will be more dominant. So just to give you a global view, what you see here are maps of the world. You don't have to read it. This is what biologists say about climate zones as to define where ecosystems can survive or where species live. And what you see here is, in red and orange, are new climates that we are creating that do not exist yet in the world. We have no idea who's going to find a happy home there. So it's positive. We're creating new stuff, but we have no idea how that's going to work. Usually it takes quite some time for an ecosystem to become balanced. So this is quite disturbing. We also see here similar map, but then disappearing climate zones. So you see here all the species in the Andes, different regions where we'll have climate zones disappearing, also species disappearing. Just to give an idea of the scale. What this graph shows you is we have permafrost in the north, soil that's temporarily frozen. All the biological material that has been deposited there over the last so many years stays intact, it doesn't decompose. By warming it up, we're opening it up to defrosting and to oxygen, and so they can be combusted into like marsh and we'll have methane emissions. We're already seeing the acreage, this is the acreage of permafrost going down over time. This is 1800s to 2100s, and we're here where the color is changing. Scientists are studying the permafrost are saying if we don't reverse the trend in putting out CO2 emissions in the next 25 years, we'll reach the first tipping point. The tipping point is that so much methane will be released from permafrost that we're going to double everything we've done as mankind so far in the last 200 years. So that's somewhere where we don't want to go.
And methane is much more troublesome than CO2.
Yes.
Times 20 times.
23 times.
Depends on the time zone you're looking at. Short-term methane is about 50 times more potent than CO2. Over a 100-year time horizon, which is mostly used in most climate models, about 24.
So that's why the methane problem with the permafrost is so bad, because it's so much more volatile than the CO2.
Just to give an idea where we are today, what you see here is a map of CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere. So here are numbers, and it corresponding changes in temperature that we observe on Earth. In September, we're at 389. So that's somewhere in this category, a little bit on the left, but in this category. So we're already experiencing more than 1 degrees temperature change, and we're approaching 2 degrees. And I checked that number again this morning, and when I show you the next one, November was 390. So between September and now, we've gained a percent point. So it's going up. Now, to give you an idea what those numbers mean, as we summarize that, it's commonly accepted in the scientific world that we're going to step over a threshold if we hit 1.5 degrees Celsius. So we're very close. We're getting very near to severe impacts on civilization and ecosystems. We're already seeing it around us. We're a little over 1 degree. The number that you should keep in mind is 350. Scientists are pretty overwhelmingly convinced that if we keep it below 350, or keep it below 350, get it below 350, we're safe for what we know how life is at the moment. We were at 350 in 1988. So in the last 20-so years, we've gone from 350 to 390. And the next 25 years, if we don't go back to 350, the permafrost thing will kick in, and some other things. And we're getting better at emitting. Last year we increased 6%, even though economic slowdown. Okay. But one last thing that I would like to show you is a graph, and it's online. And what you see here is the emission of CO2 here against the wealth of people. So it's how much money you make, how much CO2 you emit in the world. And yellow is America. Now the question is, where is China? China is red. It's going to be big bold. This is China. Do you see the time scale? 1940, 50, 60. This is India. The orange ones are Europe. So let me reword that again.
Yeah, we're number one.
Oh, China's number one.
UK is up here. So it starts in England. Industrial Revolution. And the rest of the world is gearing up. There's America. So when you talk about climate change, and we talk about who should act or who is responsible or they should do something or who should be taking action, well, it's all of us. But especially us ourselves. So we have to not only the opportunity to turn this around, we also have we're basically obligated to do this because we're starting to begin with anyway.
Can you point out Brazil and India?
India's blue dot.
India.
Okay.
It's very interesting that in Durban this week,
This is India.
those three big dots shot down the climate treaty.
I'll talk to that in just a second. That's a part of the presentation. Very interesting. If you others here have been watching the developments in the climate negotiations in Durban, they wouldn't have gotten an agreement of any kind if the developing, so-called rapidly emerging nations had not said we're going to stay until we get something. Here is the problem with these negotiations. Personal note, I was in a role play game, a 5-hour game at a conference, based on the models that project out our decisions out to the end of the century. 3.5 hours into it, not a group. The groups were developed world, rapidly emerging nations, China, India, Brazil, and the underdeveloped or lesser developed, the ones that you can bottom. In 3.5 hours, we couldn't get an agreement by anybody in any of those three groups to commit to anything. And here's the discussion. The discussion was, why should we have to do anything when those guys, you know, you can easily play it out. I was China, by the way, very instructive. And one of the Chinese delegates had a German accent, I noticed. But what we said was, in our group, the reason we couldn't get a commitment out of our group to commit to anything as far as curbing the increase in carbon emissions, and it's rapidly decreasing, was that those guys over there put everything up there right now, meaning the developed world, which is true. I mean, almost everything that's up there right now actually was put there by what we call the developed world. The guys over there, however, were saying that why should we do anything? We shouldn't have to do anything. Those guys over there, meaning China, India, and so forth, are passing us like we're standing still as far as emissions. And the guys on the bottom, of course, they said we can't do anything. We shouldn't have to do anything. We didn't put it there, and we don't have the means to do anything about it anyway. Hard stalemate. And we learned later that most people played the game, and these were people that were system scientists. We were adepts at systems thinking. We couldn't get a single commitment, and each year the clock ticked, and it got worse. Until somebody said, maybe we're looking at this wrong. But this time you can see what's going to happen in 2100. We're all doomed. Nobody makes it out. Okay? So maybe the question we should be asking is, what can we do to save us all? What's our unique contribution to save us all? In less than probably 45 minutes, we had commitments made. It became a race to the top, a race to the best. We said, well, we can do it. China, we'll do it. And 6 years after the developed worlds do it, the developed nations do it, and then we said, well, wait a minute, we can do better than that. We've got some resources they don't have, so we can beat them. So it became a race to quality, a race to survival. 3.5 hours, not a single commitment. In another hour, we had all the commitments made, and we won. We won. People walked out of that room with tears in their eyes. Nobody had been moved, and these are hardened system thinkers. Nobody had ever been scared that bad before. And then to see, but it can be still possible to turn around. But only when you change from what must I do to what can I do, from what must I give to what can I contribute. See the difference? That is what we've got. That's where we are. So, what do we have to do? First of all, we need a spectrum. We need an array of cost-effective and zero-carbon technologies. There are a lot of ways to tap sunlight. By the way, there's enough sunlight to fuel it all. We have to tap it. We have to do it affordably. That's where the research and development has to go. We need a whole bucket of them to choose from. Because not all will pan out, but some will. We did it before. We have to have some better system management tools. You hear about the smart grid. This is like we need a smart grid on steroids. We need to have the batteries in the car, in Dale and Pat's car, to be a part of, an assignable part of the storage for the grid. Austin Energy here, and Austin Energy manages that. Okay? That's a different role for a utility than they've ever played. I ran a utility, so I know that is a different role than utilities have ever played. That's necessary. Then we need rapid development, especially in storage and long-distance transmission. And the good news there is, in the field of nanotechnology, and there's a center here at UT, there's one at Rice, there are people working on that night and day. A lot of promise. They're talking about a unit this big, like your microwave, that sit on your counter and store 10 days of electricity for your house. Okay? That's what's possible. But the money's got to go there. research development. This is some of it's basic research, a lot of it's applied research, some of it's development, commercialization, and implementation. We've got a long way to go, but friends, we have done this before. The Apollo program, you don't know about the Polaris program, and maybe those were much bigger challenges technically than this is. And they were accomplished in far less time than we have. We got to go fast. We talk about what we have to do, that's it. And meanwhile, the way we buy time is our good old friend energy efficiency. We're wasting way too much, and we've got to get better at that fast. Fortunately, that's where you get a fast payoff. Better bang for the buck, quicker, easier to do. You can measure it, you can see it. We can buy the time, we can create the slack. Here in Austin, we can create enough slack that we can then bring on electric cars faster and not have to increase the generation. So we make unnecessary things like Fayette coal plant. We're not against Fayette coal plant. We're just saying it's not needed. If we do it right, we don't need it. That's pretty exciting, right?
Yeah.
Amen.
Good. You hear an amen? Now, just when you began to hope, now it's time for some more coal. It's a bigger problem than we know. Remember when I said that every family on the planet has got to know that their kids can have a decent life? You've got energy is the most basic thing of all. That's not all we need, but boy, if you don't have that, you are dead in the water. So here's the deal. If you're going to provide for everybody on the earth to have enough energy, eliminate energy poverty, then we got to have a lot more energy. Okay? So just when you thought you had a bit of a challenge on your end, we need about, it's estimated 3 to 5 times as much energy as the world is now using, and replacing all of the fossil fuel, all the carbon emitters. And it's got to be done starting right now. So if you were a semi-intelligent race that were observing Earth, what you'd say is, well, I guess these guys know that it's time to put all their money into what can get them to a sustainable future so they can join us in this universal society. They're putting it all in there. Anytime you spend $1, you've made an energy decision. Okay, so if you put another dollar into infrastructure for coal, for oil, for natural gas, it's going to haunt you. Because you're going to live with that for about 35, 40, 50 years. Actually, you won't. What will happen is the coal plants will all have to be shut down. There's going to be a lot of lost capital. And the financial markets will eventually figure it out. The phrase smart money, by the way, is an oxymoron. Even the financial markets will figure that out eventually. So this is the key. Solving the energy problem means having enough of it, accessible to everybody, affordable enough, and we can solve with that a lot of other problems. So if you've got a water problem, okay, if you have to, this is brute force, but if you have to, you can basically get water if you have enough energy, if it's affordable. You can't do it the other way around. So that's what playing to win means. There's no use playing to lose a little bit. You got to play to win. It doesn't make any sense. Nobody gets excited about the idea of coming in second. So what we want to do is come in first big time. This is an important bit of math here. This is just math. And I know, I promised very little math. Again, it's not no math. This is a very important equation because this tells you the rate at which you're emitting CO2 and other greenhouse gases, the rate at which you're emitting those into the atmosphere. Some of that will go into the ocean, as you pointed out. Some of it we may be able to fix to plants on the land. But basically it's going to start out by going into the atmosphere and get mixed. So now it's global. That's the rate at which we're doing it. We have to take that rate and go from positive. Right now we're going like this. We have to flatten it and then drop it. Well, that's like a freight elevator. This equation, which is just math, you know, if you remember your algebra, I'm sure everybody does, but this knocks this out, this knocks this out, this knocks this out, and guess what? This is a rate right here, GDP. That's the total measure of the economic flow through the economy. It's in dollars per year, or euros per year, or renminbis per year, depending on which currency you're on. This is per capita. This is a measure of a good surrogate for the material well-being of anybody on Earth. So this equation tells you that this is going to go up. We know that this is probably headed for about 7, 8, 10 billion. Well, it's 7 now. Probably somewhere just short of 10 billion by the end of the century. We have to increase this because there are people that want a decent lifestyle, as I mentioned. So this number has got to come up. This is efficiency. This is the efficiency, the energy intensity of the economy. And this has been improving about 1% a year for about 20 years, but we need to make it faster. That's where the efficiency comes in. That's where that term matters. And this is what part of the energy is carbon. So this, in terms of what we can do about it globally, we can't do anything much about this. We want this to get bigger. We can improve a little bit here. Almost all, this is the policy variable. This is the only thing we really have a lot of control over. And that's why we say the carbon that's in the atmosphere and all the greenhouse gases, that has got to be slowed down, stopped, reversed, and then dropped. Now, if we go to carbon-free energy, this number drops eventually to 0. We can gradually bring this down and eventually tame it. But it's got, there's a huge time lag. The inertia in this system is now. The reason we haven't seen any more than we have already is because of the inertia in the system. That inertia works against us when we start changing. So get to know that. A little equation, it's your friend, and that contains both the good stuff, which is getting enough for everybody, and where we have to dig into the bad stuff or offsetting. Okay? Yeah. 2 minutes. Okay, here we go. People have said, well, all well and good to talk about solar energy, but we simply don't have enough. The land area is enormous. So this, even without worrying about, even without thinking about rooftop solar collectors, this could go to the 6 biggest deserts in the world and put solar farms in there. This is how much land it would take. And that is land that's not growing anything right now. Okay? Don't get scared about how much area it's going to take to do solar. That's a red herring. This is the renewable energy that's available in the States. Anything that's green means we got more than enough. Texas, of course, you can't read the number, but we got way more than enough. There are only a few places in the country. And when we developed that, remember the long distance transmission? That's essential in order to be able to share it. But that's just U.S. And you can draw this map in a lot of other places as well. What do we need? Some of the core elements, the critical success factors, is we got to have continental electrical grids. Again, this is coming out of the labs right now. Local energy storage. So you have continental grids to move the energy from where it is to where it needs to be. That's electrical. Local electrical storage. And you got to be able to be smart enough to put it all together. And this is the bridge starting yesterday. That's why energy efficiency is so important. This is going to be the last substantive slide, and you can I'll guide you through it. But this shows you you refer to the fact that cost reduction in solar, and this is true in the other renewables too, but especially in solar. This shows you over time how that curve comes down. But this is called an experience curve or learning curve. The way you do this, you count the cumulative production of all of the solar cells in the world. The cumulative production since time zero. Most of it was more recent. So this is 1978. This corresponds to 2020. What this shows is that as the cumulative capacity, the cumulative production goes up, cost comes down. That's how come you got a device like this that can compute better than anything that we knew of 40 years ago in a room this big. I had one of those. It's a lot handier to use. But this is the same thing. This is the same thing. And after all, the solar cell is a semiconductor, for Pete's sake. So it's got to occur to somebody sooner or later that, hey, the same experience curve might follow. And as a matter of fact, it is. So we solved the area problem. We're on the way to solving the economic problem. So what can we do? All right, I'll just quickly say, mention the Energy Action Team, working with IEN, the Interfaith Environmental Network, meets every Monday. We're going to work hard this next year. We're going to try to achieve climate neutrality of the people that take the Green Pledge, which we'll tell you more about in the team meetings. And then we want to clone that, take it out through congregations that are part of IEN and ultimately the congregations in the town, in the region that are not. And meanwhile, we'll be connecting with people who are doing the same thing. We're not, believe it or not, the only smart people on the planet. Thank God. We also have some lobbying to do, and we need to especially involve the young people. That's the future that's going to matter the most to them. So, whoops. Try to get this one. So our focus is on measurable actions aligned with this transforming the energy system. We need a lot more energy, but it has to be the right kind. Eventually, we'll know we got a lot of carbon in the wrong place. We got to get it out of the atmosphere and into the soil, but that's for another story. So we want to use what we can, build on what's already done. Interfaith Power and Light. We've got a few of our own wild cards to put in here. The Green Pledge will involve this, where everybody can get climate. We call it climate positive, because you're actually putting out less by your own decisions than is being pulled out by nature. Okay. One last sprint to the finish line.
Yeah, let's make it a short one. There's some time for some questions. This is our second presentation forum like this. The last time we also asked people to write down the answers to the same 3 questions. And we'd like to share that information with you as a growth of collective knowledge and energy and enthusiasm and action. And the next group that we'll talk to will include the results that you put down there. And let's just see what people came out the last time we did this. And the first question was, what are the most pressing questions that you have? And what you see here is a collection of all the answers, and then a summation of the bigger the word, the more often it was used. So what you see here is that most people were yearning to get involved through IEN to work on climate change. So the main question was, how do we do this? It's a positive question. When we asked them all, what actions have you taken in the last couple of months to work on these issues, reducing energy use, improving climate change? A lot of words in here that are about acting, it's about working, it's about using, it's about, and everybody had scenarios, how they were working on this dilemma, this challenge. And what Bob just pointed out is that we want to help you and serve you in finding those things and to spend your energy on things that really pay off and have high leverage results. And if we all do that together, then we do it one by one, become carbon neutral, even carbon positive as an individual, as a congregation, we're growing this movement and we're growing the future potential for the Earth. So a lot of action going on. The last question was, if we're going to do this together with the Climate Buddies, Interfaith Environmental Network, set up an energy action team within IEN, next step is to set up the same teams in different congregations and get the congregation sign off on the same challenge. The question was, what do we want to have achieved at the end of 2012? And this is basically what came out of that meeting. And what's beautiful here is that it's about raising awareness. It's looking at a faith-based answer. People want to be involved. And it's about us. It's about everybody. So this is about you. This is not about me or Bob or anything else. This is not about whether you're from the U.S. or China. This is just about us. This is about us working together on the challenges that we're facing. And we're positive and confident that we can get that done. If you're interested in getting involved, Climate Buddies has a website. We have a climatebuddies.org. There was a handout with some information, a Facebook page. The Interfaith Environmental Network is always looking for members. We're looking for churches to help us define what are the actual good actions to take. So we're doing audits with churches. We've done 2 so far. There are a few coming up. We'd like to see more and try to define those high leverage action points. And if we find them, turn that into a program where congregations can actively participate and take a green pledge. And we'll do the same for individuals. So if you want to help that, you want to join that, you want to be there, then be at those meetings, and you're invited. So thank you for your attention.
And the next one starts in about 2 minutes. Right here.
Change.